The night was silent, but the silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, broken only by the hiss of fire and the crackle of falling metal. The battlefield was still alive with the echoes of war. Broken machines lay scattered across the dark ground. Giant metal arms and twisted engines sparked faint blue light in the shadows. Smoke rose into the sky, blocking the stars above. The air smelled of iron, dust, and burned wires. In the middle of this destruction, something strange shone faintly. A body, not human, not machine, something between both. An alien girl lay on the ground, broken and helpless. Her silver hair was spread across the dirt, shining under the dim glow of fire. Her skin was smooth and pale, but carried a faint glow, something not of this world. Her eyes were closed, her breath shallow, and her body looked fragile yet powerful. But her limbs were gone. Her arms were broken off, replaced with damaged cybernetic parts. Sparks flashed from the edges of her metallic bones. Her legs too were torn, one missing below the knee, the other bent unnaturally, with circuits exposed. She looked like a goddess pulled down into the dirt and left to die far away. Footsteps echoed. Heavy, slow, careful, a man walked through the battlefield. He was human, but not a soldier. His clothes were dusty overalls, and his hands were covered with scars from tools, not weapons. He was a mechanic. He carried a small lamp, its glow fighting against the darkness. His eyes searched the wreckage, looking for useful scraps, metal, wires, parts he could take home. For him, war was not about fighting, it was about surviving. And survival meant finding what was left behind. Then he stopped. His lamp froze on. Her at first, he thought she was another broken machine, another half-destroyed robot left behind in the chaos. But then he saw her chest rise and fall. He heard the faintest breath. She was alive. The man's heart pounded. A living alien, and not just any alien. She was beautiful, almost painfully beautiful. Her glowing skin, her smooth face, her hair that shimmered like threads of silver fire. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. She looked fragile, helpless, and yet too perfect to be real. Fear touched him. He knew what aliens could do. They were enemies, stronger, smarter, sometimes merciless. He should walk away. He should not get involved. But something inside him refused. He stepped closer, his boots crunching broken glass. Sparks hissed from her limbs, and for a moment, he thought she might explode like broken tech. But then he noticed her expression. Even in unconsciousness, her face looked peaceful, almost human. There was no rage, no cruelty, only pain. He crouched beside her, studying the broken connections in her arms. Whoever she was, she had lost everything. No weapons, no strength, no allies, just lying in the dirt, waiting for death. The mechanic whispered to himself, "She's still alive." He looked around. The battlefield was empty. No soldiers, no patrols, no sound except the crackling fire. Nobody would know if he helped her. Nobody would care if he left her. His mind fought with his heart. She's alien. She's dangerous. She's not your problem. But another voice inside said, "She's alive. She needs help, and you are the only one here." His lamp flickered as he leaned closer. The girl's body glowed faintly, as if her skin carried its own light. She was too strange, too beautiful, too broken. A part of him wondered if this was a trap, if saving her would destroy him. But when he saw her chest rise again, weak and slow, he knew, if he left her, she would die. The mechanic sighed. His hands trembled, not from fear of her, but from fear of what his choice would mean. Helping her might change everything. Carefully, he reached under her shoulders. Her body was heavier than it looked, the weight of metal mixed with flesh. Sparks burned his gloves as he lifted her, but he did not let go. Her head rested against his chest, her silver hair brushing his neck. He could feel her faint breath, warm against his skin. For a moment, he simply stood there in the smoke and fire, holding her broken body. The world around them was ruined, but in that moment, all he could think was how fragile she felt. Too fragile for war, too fragile to leave behind. He adjusted his grip and began to walk. Each step was heavy, but he did not stop. He carried her away from the battlefield, away from death, toward the safety of his workshop. As he walked, The silence seemed to break. The air felt colder, sharper. The stars above peeked through the smoke, as if watching. The man did not know who she was or why she had been here. He did not know if saving her was the right choice. But he knew one thing. The story of his life had just changed forever, and the girl in his arms, broken and helpless, might be the reason humanity's fate would change too. Under the dim light of his flickering lamp, the human mechanic pushed the heavy door of his workshop open with his shoulder. The hinges squeaked as he carried the alien girl inside, her weight pressing against him like a strange reminder of the choice he had just made. He placed her gently on the metal worktable, the same table where he had fixed countless machines, but never anything alive like her. The room smelled of oil, steel, and smoke. Old wires hung from the ceiling, tools scattered across the benches. Sparks still glowed faintly in the girl's broken limbs, tiny reminders that she was both more than flesh and less than whole. Her chest rose and fell, slow and weak, but steady. For a moment, the mechanic just stood and stared at her, unsure of what to do next. He had repaired machines his whole life, but this was no machine. This was an alien living, breathing, and far too beautiful to ignore. Her silver hair shimmered under the weak light, and her skin glowed faintly, almost as if she carried starlight beneath it. He shook his head, forcing himself not to think of her beauty. She was a problem to solve, not a dream to admire. He reached for his tools. The sound of metal clinking echoed through the silent workshop. He carefully inspected the damage. Her left arm was nothing but a broken joint with wires hanging loose. Her right arm ended midway, glowing circuits sparking dangerously. Both her legs were ruined, one twisted, the other almost gone. He swallowed hard. This isn't repair work, he muttered to himself. This is rebuilding. As he touched the damaged circuits, her body twitched slightly. He froze, heart pounding, afraid she would wake and attack him. But her eyes remained closed, and her breathing stayed faint. Still, the small movement reminded him she was alive. Every spark, every breath, every tiny twitch was proof of that. For hours he worked, his hands moving with precision and care. He cleaned the broken joints, attached temporary wires to keep her energy flow stable, and replaced shattered parts with spare pieces from his shelves. Sparks lit the room in flashes of blue and orange, each burst reflecting off her smooth skin. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he worked, the effort both technical and emotional. Sometimes he caught himself looking at her face longer than he should. It was strange, unsettling. She was not human, yet her features carried a kind of perfection he could not ignore. Her lips, her jawline, the faint curve of her neck, it was beauty he had never seen before. And in her brokenness, she seemed even more fragile, almost human in her helplessness. He shook the thought away and tightened another wire dot as the night dragged on, his mind filled with questions. Who was she? Why had she been on that battlefield? Was she a soldier, a spy, or something else entirely? He imagined her fighting, glowing with power before being torn apart. Or maybe she had been running from something. The mystery burned inside him. But he knew answers would only come when she woke. Finally, as dawn began to paint the edges of the sky, her body stirred. The mechanic dropped his wrench, eyes fixed on her face. Her eyelids fluttered, and a soft glow escaped as her eyes opened for the first time. They were not human eyes, they were brighter, deeper, like twin galaxies. Hidden within her gaze, for a moment, time froze. The human and the alien stared at each other. She looked confused, frightened, and weak. He raised his hands slowly, showing he had no weapon. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice low. "Come, I'm not here to hurt you." She blinked, her glowing eyes scanning the room. Her lips moved, but the words that came out were in a language he could not understand. Strange, melodic sounds filled the workshop, soft and broken. She tried again, her voice trembling, and then stopped, coughing weakly. The mechanic stepped closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. Her skin was warm, softer than he expected, and the faint glow beneath it pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. She flinched at his touch, but then her gaze softened, as if realizing he was not her enemy. He smiled faintly. "You're alive because of me. I fixed what I could. You'll be okay." She tilted her head, her silver hair falling across her face, and studied him. There was no anger in her eyes, only exhaustion and a strange hint of curiosity. For the first time, she seemed to relax, sinking slightly back onto the table. The mechanic sat beside her, still unsure what he had gotten himself into. He knew nothing about her people, nothing about what saving her would mean. Maybe it would bring danger to his door. Maybe soldiers, human or alien, would come looking for her. But sitting there, watching her breathe, he felt a strange sense of peace outside. The world was still broken, still dangerous, but inside this workshop, something new had begun. A fragile connection between two lives that should never have touched. A mechanic who had no reason to care, an alien girl who had every reason to hate him. And yet, in the silence, trust was starting to take root. The mechanic leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. He knew this was only the beginning. She was awake. Now, and soon, she would speak. Soon, the questions would come. But deep inside, he already felt the weight of a truth he could not escape. His choice to save her had already changed everything. And outside the workshop walls, the echoes of war were not finished. They would both have to face what was coming. The mechanic sat in silence, his back against the wall of the workshop, listening to the faint hum of his machines. The alien girl rested on the table, her breathing steadier now, her glowing eyes half closed but alert. She was watching him. He could feel her gaze like a weight, heavy yet soft, filled with questions she could not ask. He rubbed his tired hands together. His mind spun with thoughts he couldn't quiet. Saving her had been instinct, not reason. Now reason was catching up. He had brought an alien into his home, into his workshop, into his life. And she was not just any alien. She was too beautiful, too different, too dangerous. She shifted slightly, her repaired arm twitching as if testing his work. A soft spark hissed, then faded. She flinched, but the pain did not last. Her eyes flicked toward him, uncertain, like a child seeing fire for the first time. "You shouldn't even be alive," he whispered, though not unkindly. His words were more to himself than to her. She tilted her head, as if trying to understand. Her lips parted, but only strange sounds came out, gentle, melodic, broken words from a language he could not follow. She stopped quickly, frustrated, then lowered her gaze. The mechanic sighed. He wanted to tell her everything, that she was safe here, that he didn't mean harm, that she didn't have to be afraid. But he also wanted to tell himself something else, to stop, to end this now, to turn away before it was too late. Because he had a choice. He stood up, pacing across the workshop floor. "What am I doing?" he muttered under his breath. "This isn't my fight. She isn't my problem." He ran a hand through his messy hair and stared at the door. The easiest choice was simple: walk away, leave her, pretend she had never been here. That was what survival demanded. But when he turned back, she was still watching him. Her glowing eyes followed every step he made, not with fear, but with something else, something quiet, searching. He froze. He remembered the moment he found her broken on the battlefield, breathing faintly as if clinging to life itself. He remembered how fragile she felt in his arms, how warm her breath had been against his chest. That memory burned in his mind, stronger than logic, stronger than fear. He took a slow breath and stepped closer to her again. Her gaze did not waver. He could see the exhaustion on her face, the weakness in her movements, and yet, behind it all, there was strength waiting to return if he gave her the chance. His hands trembled slightly as he touched the wires along her damaged leg, checking if the connection still held. She flinched but did not resist. The spark between them was not only electric, it was human. "Why you?" he whispered, his voice shaking with a strange mix of frustration and wonder. "Out of all the things I could have found out there, why? Did it have to be you?" She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the distance between them seemed smaller. The mechanic sat back down, staring at her. He knew then that leaving her was impossible. He had already chosen. The moment he picked her up from the dirt, the moment he carried her into his workshop, his fate was sealed. He was bound to her now, whether he liked it or not. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're staying here," he said quietly. "I'll keep fixing you." I'll make sure you live. I don't know why. Maybe I'm a fool, but I can't walk away." Her eyes blinked slowly, and for the first time, he thought he saw a spark of understanding. Not in words, but in the way she held his gaze, steady and calm. The mechanic felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was not love, not yet, but it was something close to it. Compassion, connection. A fragile thread tying to very different lives together, outside. The wind howled against the workshop walls. Distant echoes of war rumbled like thunder. But inside, the air felt still, almost sacred. The mechanic rose again, gathering tools, preparing to continue his work. She needed more repairs, more care, and he would not stop until she could stand on her own again. As he leaned over her broken frame, sparks lit the room once more, casting their faces in bright flashes. Her eyes never left him, glowing softly in the firelight. She was no longer just a stranger on a battlefield. She was a secret, a promise, and perhaps the start of something far greater than he could imagine. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone, and though fear still whispered at the edges of his mind, he pushed it aside. He had made his decision. He would save her, no matter what it cost. The workshop was alive with sound. Sparks hissed, metal groaned, and the faint hum of machines filled the air. The human mechanic bent over the table, sweat dripping from his brow as his tools clinked against the alien girl's broken frame. He had worked on engines, broken weapons, and shattered machines all his life. But this was different. Every spark that leapt into the air reminded him that he was not just repairing steel. He was working on a living being. The alien girl lay still, her glowing eyes half open, watching him. Sometimes she twitched when the sparks stung her skin, but she made no sound. Her expression was calm, though he could see pain flicker across her face now and then. The glow beneath her skin pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Each pulse reminded him that she was alive, and depending on him, he connected wires carefully, his hands steady despite his racing thoughts. Each broken limb was a puzzle, a mix of flesh and circuitry he had never seen before. It was technology far beyond human understanding, yet somehow his instincts guided him. He welded, tightened, and replaced piece by piece, hoping his simple, human tools would be enough. "Hold on," he muttered under his breath, though he knew she couldn't understand him. "I'm not letting you go." Her gaze followed him, glowing softly in the dim light. At moments, he felt her trying to speak, her lips parting, strange sounds escaping. But then she would stop, as if too weak to continue. He wanted to tell her she didn't need to speak, that her eyes said enough. Hours passed. The night outside turned to morning, and still he worked. The workshop grew hot, filled with smoke and the sharp smell of metal burning. His hands grew numb, his eyes stung, but he refused to stop. Every bolt, every wire, every spark was one step closer to giving her back what she had lost. At last, he stepped back, breathing hard. One of her arms was no longer just a broken stump of wires. It was rebuilt, reinforced with spare parts and connected joints. It wasn't perfect, not as elegant as the original alien design, but it was strong. It was human work, practical, rough, and real. He watched her test it. The girl's fingers twitched, bending slowly, one by one. Her glowing eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across her face. She turned her hand, studying the repaired limb with cautious wonder. Then, for the first time, she looked directly into his eyes, not with fear, not with confusion, but with something else, gratitude. The mechanic froze. That look pierced deeper than words. It was silent, but powerful, as if she had spoken straight into his heart. He felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. "You're welcome," he whispered, almost embarrassed by the weight of her gaze. Encouraged, he moved onto her leg. The damage there was worse, twisted beyond recognition. He had to cut away broken pieces, sparks flying as he worked the torch. She winced but didn't resist. He admired her strength. Even broken and helpless, she endured pain in silence. The more he worked, the more he realized something strange. Her body seemed to respond to him. The circuits pulsed brighter when he touched certain points, as if recognizing his effort. It felt less like fixing a machine and more like helping something heal. That thought gave him energy, kept him moving, even when his arms ached. When he finally attached a temporary leg brace made from spare metal rods. She lifted it weakly. It wasn't perfect, but it held. She could move again, even if only slightly. Her eyes glowed brighter at the sight of it, and she let out a soft sound, not words, but almost like a sigh of relief. The mechanic sat heavily in his chair, exhausted. He wiped his forehead and laughed softly to himself. "I must be insane," he said, "fixing an alien in the middle of a war. What's wrong with me?" But when he looked at her again, lying on the table with new strength flowing through her body, he knew the answer. There was nothing wrong. This was the only thing that felt right. The alien girl raised her repaired arm slowly, shakily, and placed her hand on his. Her touch was warm, delicate, and filled with unspoken meaning. His heart pounded in his chest. She couldn't say the words, but he understood them. "Thank you." In that moment, the noise of the world outside faded. There was no war, no danger, no reason to be afraid. Just two beings, alien to each other, yet bound by something simple and human. But the silence did not last. A distant rumble shook the ground, faint but real. The mechanic's head snapped. Toward the door, he knew that sound. Engines, vehicles, soldiers, someone was coming. He looked back at her. She, too, had heard it. Her glowing eyes narrowed, and for the first time, he saw fear in them. Not of him, but of what was outside. The mechanic's jaw tightened. He had just rebuilt her. He had given her a second chance, and he wasn't going to let anyone take that away. He grabbed his wrench, the tool that had saved countless machines and now an alien life. Sparks still flickered in the workshop, the smell of fire and steel hanging heavy in the air. He stood tall, ready for whatever came next. The girl's hand gripped his wrist, weak but certain, as if telling him not to leave her alone. He met her gaze again, and in that silent exchange, a promise formed between them that no matter what came through that door, they would face it together. The first light of morning crept through the cracked windows of the workshop, painting long shadows across the floor. Dust floated in the air, turning golden in the sunlight. The mechanic sat slumped in his chair, tools scattered around him. His clothes stained with oil and ash. His eyes were heavy, but sleep never came. He kept watching her. The alien girl lay on the work table, her repaired limbs twitching faintly, her glowing eyes half closed. He had worked through the night, rebuilding her piece by piece, and now, as the sun touched her silver hair, she looked less like a broken weapon of war and more like something otherworldly, fragile, alive, too beautiful to belong in this ruined world. She stirred, her fingers curling slightly, then her eyes opened fully, bright, glowing, like stars burning in the depths of her gaze. The mechanic felt his chest tighten. She was awake, truly awake. Her gaze darted around the room, taking in the machines, the tools, the walls blackened with soot. Then her eyes locked on him. She didn't look away. For a long moment, the two of them simply stared at each other, human and alien, rescuer and stranger. He cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "You're safe here," he said softly. His voice was tired but steady. "I fixed what I could. You'll need more repairs, but you're alive." She blinked slowly, as if trying to understand. Her lips moved, forming strange, melodic words that made no sense to him. He frowned, shaking his head. "I don't understand." She tried again, her voice a little stronger this time. Still the same alien tongue, beautiful and sharp like music, but foreign. She stopped, frustration flashing in her glowing eyes. She closed them briefly, then opened them again, softer this time. The mechanic sighed, rubbing his face. "We don't speak the same language. That's going to be a problem." He thought for a moment, then pointed to himself. "Human." His voice was slow, deliberate. "Human." She tilted her head, her hair falling across her face. She studied him carefully, then whispered something that sounded almost like the word. "Human." His eyes widened. A small laugh escaped his lips, surprised and relieved. "Yes, human." Her gaze brightened faintly. Then, with visible effort, she lifted her repaired arm and touched her chest. "LN." The word was soft, broken, but clear enough. He repeated it. She nodded weakly. A faint smile touched her lips for the first time. The mechanic leaned back, exhaling slowly. "So you've got a name, Ellen." He pointed to himself again. "And doesn't matter. You wouldn't understand it anyway." He shook his head, amused by the absurdity. Human and Ellen. "Guess that'll have to do." She watched him closely, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. There was something unspoken in her gaze, gratitude, trust, maybe even curiosity. She looked less like a wounded soldier, and more like someone searching for hope. Then the sound returned. A low rumble outside, closer this time, engines. The mechanic froze, his ears straining. He recognized it now, patrols, soldiers sweeping the outskirts of the battlefield. His stomach twisted. If they found her here, it would be over. Ellen must have heard it too. Her glowing eyes widened, and for the first time, fear spread across her face. She tried to move, to sit up, but her body was still too weak. She winced, her limbs trembling under the effort. "Don't," he whispered urgently. Rushing to her side, he held her down gently. "You're not strong enough yet." Her hand caught his wrist, gripping tightly with surprising strength. Her eyes burned into his, silently begging. He understood. She didn't want to be captured. Not again. He swallowed hard. "I won't let them take you." The words left his mouth before he could stop them, but he meant them. The sound of engines grew louder. Dust trembled on the shelves, rattling with each passing second. The mechanic moved quickly, grabbing a heavy tarp from the corner and pulling it over her body to hide her glow. She lay still beneath it, her eyes peeking out, filled with trust and fear. He picked up his wrench and moved to the door, his heart hammering in his chest. Outside, shadows shifted. Soldiers' voices echoed faintly, carried by the wind. He held his breath, every muscle tight. Minutes passed. Boots crunched outside, then faded slowly into the distance. The rumble of engines grew weaker until it vanished completely. The mechanic let out a shaky breath and leaned against the door, his knees almost giving out. When he turned back, Ellen was watching him from under the tarp. Relief softened her glowing eyes. He walked to her side and pulled the cover away, revealing her again. "It's fine," he said quietly. "They're gone." Her hand lifted, trembling, and reached for his arm. She touched him lightly, her fingers warm against his skin. It was not just gratitude. It was something deeper. A silent promise, an understanding that went beyond language. For the first time, the mechanic realized what he had done. He hadn't just saved her life. He had tied his own fate to hers. And now, no matter what danger came, they were bound together. Outside, the war was still raging. But inside this small workshop, a fragile alliance had been born, human and alien, mechanic and AELN. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the mechanic knew this was only the beginning. The day passed slowly inside the workshop. The mechanic tried to keep himself busy, checking tools, tightening loose parts, pretending he wasn't thinking too much. But every time he glanced at the worktable, his eyes found her, Ellen, the alien, girl who should have been dead, who should not even be here. She was sitting up now, leaning against the wall, her silver hair falling over her face. The glow in her skin pulsed faintly, like quiet starlight. She watched him with a calm that unsettled him. Whenever he moved, her eyes followed, not in fear, but in a way that felt deeper, as if she was trying to learn him, to understand the strange human who had carried her from the battlefield and rebuilt her with his rough hands. He finally broke the silence. "You're staring." His voice was low, almost embarrassed. Ellen tilted her head, not understanding the words, but her lips curved. Faintly, almost like a smile, she lifted her repaired arm, flexing the fingers slowly, and then tapped her chest. "Ellen," she said softly. "Yes," he nodded. "Ellen." He pointed at himself. "Human." She repeated it, her voice still weak but clearer than before. "Human." The way she said it made the simple words sound almost sacred. For some reason, the mechanic's chest tightened. He shook it off quickly and busied himself with a pile of wires. "You shouldn't trust me so easily," he muttered. "Humans aren't always kind. You'd know that if you've seen enough of us." But when he looked back, her glowing eyes were steady, focused only on him. It was strange, almost impossible. But in her gaze he saw no doubt, no suspicion, only trust. He sighed, sitting down across from her. "Why are you here?" he asked quietly, even though he knew she couldn't answer. "Why this planet? Why this war? Why me?" She blinked slowly, then touched her chest again. "Ellen." Then she pointed at him. "Who, man?" She didn't have the words, but the gesture was enough. It made his stomach twist. "You think we're connected somehow," he whispered. "Maybe you're right." A rumble of thunder rolled outside, shaking the walls. The war felt closer every day. The mechanic rubbed his face, knowing they didn't have much time. Sooner or later, someone would come looking, and when they did, finding an alien girl inside a human mechanic's shop would mean only one thing: execution. He stood, suddenly, frustration boiling inside him. "You're going to get me killed." His words were sharp, but his tone broke at the edges. "I should have left you out there. I should have." He stopped, his voice catching in his throat. He couldn't finish the sentence. Ellen's eyes widened slightly at his outburst, but she didn't shrink back. Instead, she reached out. Her repaired hand, still trembling from weakness, touched his arm gently, warm, steady. A simple gesture, but it silenced the storm inside him. He froze, staring at her hand, then slowly met her gaze. The glow in her eyes softened, and for the first time, he understood without words. She wasn't asking for pity. She wasn't even asking for help anymore. She was offering something: trust, connection. The mechanic sank back into his chair, exhaling hard. "Damn it," he muttered, his voice cracking into a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "You're impossible." Ellen tilted her head, her lips parting in the faintest smile. The moments stretched between them, fragile but real. The hours passed, and he continued to work on her, adjusting the makeshift repairs, strengthening the joints. She tried to help, handing him tools when she understood his gestures. It was clumsy at first, but soon it felt natural to beings who couldn't share a language, building something together in silence. At one point, she pointed to a broken part on the table, then to her damaged leg. He handed it to her, and with shaky hands, she tried to fix it herself. Sparks flew, and she winced. But she didn't give up. The mechanic chuckled softly, taking it back from her. "Easy there. Let me handle the dangerous part." Her lips moved, and though he couldn't understand, the tone was clear, teasing, almost playful. He shook his head, but he couldn't stop the small smile tugging at his mouth. As night fell again, the workshop felt different, not just a place of tools and fire, but a place alive with something new. She was no longer just a broken alien girl he had carried from the battlefield. She was a presence, a partner, someone who filled the silence with more than noise. He realized then that his loneliness, the quiet ache that had haunted him through endless nights of war, was fading, replaced by something dangerous, something powerful, a connection. He looked at her one last time before closing his eyes for rest. She was watching him again, her glowing gaze steady. He thought he saw something more than gratitude in her eyes now, something unspoken, fragile, but undeniable. As the storm rumbled outside and the war crept closer, the mechanic understood one thing with certainty: saving her had not been a mistake. It had been the only choice that mattered, and whatever came next, they would face it together. The night outside was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that carried danger in its silence. The mechanic lay half awake on the old chair near the worktable, his head tilted against the wall, while Ellen rested a few feet away, her glowing skin faint beneath the dim light. She wasn't asleep, her eyes were open, watching the ceiling as though she could hear something he could not. The mechanic stirred, sensing her unease. "What is it?" he whispered, his voice heavy from exhaustion. She turned her head slowly toward him, her silver hair slipping over her face. Her lips moved, forming a soft sound in her language, strange, melodic, urgent. He didn't understand the words, but the tone was enough: warning, fear. He sat up quickly, listening. At first, he heard nothing. Then it came, a distant rumble, low but growing, engines, heavy, mechanical, moving closer with every passing second. His chest tightened. Soldiers again. This time, it wasn't a passing patrol. This was heavier, larger. Ellen struggled to sit upright, her repaired limbs trembling as she pushed herself against the wall. The glow in her skin pulsed. Faster, betraying her fear. She looked at him, her eyes filled with urgency. He didn't need words to understand. If they were found together, there would be no mercy. The mechanic cursed under his breath and moved quickly. He grabbed a few tools and swept them into a box, then pulled a thick cloth over the table to hide the scattered alien parts. The sound of engines grew louder, echoing through the walls of the workshop. Lights flickered faintly outside. Cutting through the cracks, "Stay quiet," he whispered to her, holding up a hand. "No matter what happens." Ellen stared at him, her glowing eyes wide, then nodded faintly. She pulled herself lower against the wall, trying to make her body small, trying to vanish. The mechanic's heart hammered in his chest as heavy boots crunched outside. Shadows moved across the thin cracks of light beneath the door. Voices followed, sharp and commanding, though muffled by distance. He couldn't make out the words, but he didn't need to. He knew what they were searching for. The door shook suddenly. A fist pounded against it, once, twice, 3 times. The mechanic froze, his body stiff as stone. A voice barked from outside, demanding entry. He moved toward the door slowly, his wrench heavy in his hand. His mind raced. He could pretend. He could lie. But one mistake, and they would find her. His eyes flicked toward Ellen. She was staring at him, silent, but filled with trust, as if his choice alone decided both their fates. Another pound rattled the door. The mechanic gritted his teeth and shouted back, his voice steady though his stomach churned. "What do you want?" The voice outside replied sharply, ordering him to open up. He hesitated, then slowly pulled the lock. The door creaked open, and bright light spilled inside, blinding him for a second. 3 soldiers stood outside, armored and armed, their faces hard. One stepped forward, scanning the workshop with cold eyes. "Routine inspection," the soldier said flatly. "We've had reports of unusual activity near this sector." The mechanic forced a calm nod. "Just me here. I'm a mechanic. Been salvaging scrap from the battlefield, same as always." The soldier's gaze lingered on him, then swept across the workshop. The other two stepped inside, boots heavy on the floor. They poked at piles of parts, kicked at boxes, their rifles always ready. Every second stretched like an eternity. The mechanic stood still, gripping his wrench tightly, praying they wouldn't notice the faint glow in the corner where Ellen tried to hide. Beneath the shadows, he prayed she wouldn't move, wouldn't make a sound. One soldier stopped near the wall, just feet away from her. His hand reached toward the tarp covering the spare pieces. The mechanic's pulse thundered in his ears. He forced a step forward. "Careful with that," he said quickly, his tone sharp. "That peel's unstable. Could set off a spark if you're not careful. Last thing you want is an explosion in here." The soldier frowned, pulling his hand back slightly. He muttered something under his breath and moved away, clearly uninterested in wasting time. After another tense minute, the lead soldier gave a curt nod. "Fine, nothing here. Keep out of trouble." He turned, and just like that, they were gone. The door closed behind them, leaving silence in their wake. The mechanic stood frozen for a long moment, his chest heaving with relief. His grip on the wrench loosened, and it clattered to the floor slowly. He turned toward her. Ellen was staring at him, her glowing eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before. Not just trust, not just gratitude, something deeper, a bond, silent and powerful, forged in fear and survival. She lifted her repaired hand, trembling, and reached toward him. He walked to her without hesitation, taking it gently. Her fingers closed around his, warm and alive. They said nothing. They didn't need to. The moment spoke louder than words. Outside, the engines rumbled again, fading into the distance. But both of them knew this was not the end. The soldiers would return. The war would come closer. The mechanic looked at her and saw not just an alien girl he had repaired. He saw a turning point, a reason to fight, a reason to defy the chaos outside. She looked back at him with glowing eyes, and he felt it in his chest, the beginning of something larger than either of them could imagine. The war wasn't finished. Their story wasn't finished.